In today's video, you'll learn how to change the front brake pads and rotors on a 2020 Ford F-150. Be sure to watch to the end of the video to see all the tools that were used so that you can do this job at home. Then we're going to go ahead and jack up the vehicle. You'll follow this body line straight down and you'll look underneath. And on the frame, you'll see a small arrow. That arrow is exactly where we're going to place our jack. And then we'll come rearward and we'll replace our jack stand right here to keep the vehicle safe while we work on the driver's side front. Before we begin on the driver's side, we have turned the wheel all the way to the right to give us the most amount of access to the caliper bolts on the back. Now when you do the passenger side, you'll just turn the wheel all the way to the left. Walking around the vehicle, we have placed our two wheel chocks on the rear right, and we will switch these wheel chocks to the rear left or the driver's side when we go to do the passenger fronts. To begin, I'm going to go ahead and slide my jack. And I'm going to slide my jack underneath and lower down onto the jack. And then I'll also keep my jack stand and my jack slightly tight. And I can go ahead and use my 21mm socket in my impact to remove the tire. Because these are very nice alloy wheels, I want to keep them nice and scratch free. So I'm going to go ahead and use my 21mm socket that has a nice protector to stop me from scratching the wheels. If you do not have an impact gun and you're doing this at home, what you'll want to do is use a breaker bar, your 21mm socket, leave the vehicle on the ground, set the parking brake, and then break them loose. But since we have these tools, we can go ahead and take these off. And I like to use my wheel and tire assembly as my seat. Now, if you remember earlier, I said that I actually use two screwdrivers, and this is why. I like to pry with two screwdrivers against the caliper because these are dual piston calipers. If they were single piston, I would only need one screwdriver, but because they are dual, I need two. Now, this little step is going to save us a whole bunch of time. What I can do now is put both screwdrivers in and very slowly decompress both pistons at the same time. And I'll continue. This is going to have such a lasting effect for us because we're not going to have to go through and decompress the pistons after this step. And it's way easier because it's still attached to the car. So I have all the nice, glorious leverage that I need. Now that we're perfectly compressed here, we can go ahead and remove the caliper. For this next step, I'm going to use my 13mm to remove this upper caliper bracket and this lower caliper bracket. But before I get ahead of myself, I'm going to take my bungee cord and string that through the upper control arm. The reason you want to do that, you don't want to have any weight on this brake hose right here. You only want to have the weight be supported by these bungee cords. So I'll go ahead. And I always start with removing the lower one and move my hardware, keep it in a safe place, and the upper one. Now the reason that I do the upper one last is so that I can keep my hand in a good position to grab it and bring it up here to the top. And then I'll just hook into my caliper through the visual sight holes and let it hang out over here. So you can see there's no weight, my caliper's out of the way, and both my pistons are fully compressed. The next step is to go ahead and just pry out your pads. Now, if you were only doing pads, you could just replace the pads here and reassemble. But we are also replacing the rotors because the pads are okay on this vehicle, but there's a very serious brake pulsation that the client is complaining about, and that's why we're going to go ahead and replace these. At this point of the job, I just go ahead and do a quick check of my caliper side pins to make sure that they're good. I inspect the boots. Everything seems fine, so I'm very happy. We're going to grab our 21mm impact socket with our impact gun and remove this lower bolt and the upper bolt. I'm going to go ahead and remove the lower bolt first. And if you don't have an impact gun, you can certainly use a 1/2-inch breaker bar. And I'm going to go ahead and move my caliper up and out of the way at this point, like so. Still connected to my nice bungee cords here. And I'll go ahead and remove my upper bolt. And because I removed the upper bolt last, I can just very easily grab it and gently move it away. For this next part, I'm going to go ahead and move my caliper back down into this lower position. And I'm going to grab my dead blow hammer and I'm going to swing and smack from behind, because typically there's a small bead of rust that forms and stops me from being able to naturally hit this off. So I'm going to smack it from the front and from the rear and from the front at the top and at the bottom. And at that point, it will come right off. A lot of people waste a lot of time with this. Grab your dead blow and smack it out. You have a really great opportunity now to clean up top here where there's any rust or debris, and the face of the spindle. So I'll go ahead, get any rust, knock it loose. You want to make sure that you knock any of the loose rust. If you knock the rust off and you come at this with a wire brush, you'll extend the service life of your brakes, because this will be a flat surface. If you don't do this step, you'll end up putting the rotor on not a flat surface, and it will warp prematurely. Now at this point, you could restart assembly, but it's really important to do this next step, which is cleaning and servicing the caliper bracket. So I'm going to bring my caliper bracket here, and the first thing I'm going to do is clean the slides. So I'm just going to gently pull out on the boots on the slides. I'm going to wipe away the old grease, and then I'm going to take my new grease. I'm going to lather it on here nicely. And then I'm just going to gently put it back into its keeper. Now you see all that grease kind of bubbling out. It'll actually end up putting almost a seal inside this bore. So you kind of need to work it in and out. I'll do the same thing on this side. Nice little bit. You can put too much and you won't be able to close it. So at this point, I'm just twisting it, working it in and out, and I'm just going to press it until it presses on, and press it until it presses on. Now I do one more step here, which is I gently peel back this upper piece as I press it in, and what will happen is it'll create a suction of the caliper bracket moving in. You can see here, the caliper bracket is returning in, and if you look at this caliper bracket here, this little slide pin, it's kind of like a springboard. So you go ahead, you press it in, you peel this back, lets all the air out, and then release it, and you see now it acts as a little springboard in. All right, so we have plenty of caliper grease in there. Wipe the excess away. You don't want to have any additional grease out here. So we're just going to wipe this away, and we're going to wipe this away. Now, at this point, if your brake pad kit did not come with new hardware or did not come with new anti-rattle clips, you'd want to clean these. Our kit did come with new anti-rattle clips, so we'll go ahead and replace these. So if you didn't have new anti-rattle clips, you could just go ahead and wire brush it, and just put a little bit of grease, just a dab, on all of these guys, and then slide your pads back in. But since we have new ones, we're gonna go ahead and replace these. So to replace them, you just pry them out with a screwdriver, and then pry them out again on the other side, and now you're good. The next thing is you want to clean up any of this rust so that you have a nice smooth surface. So we'll go ahead here with our wire brush and brush it again, and the same thing here on the bottom. You can see that there's a little bit of buildup, and at this point we are sitting pretty. So we're going to go ahead and grab our pads, or pad box, and find our new anti-rattle clips. We're going to go ahead and install our anti-rattle clips. Now you can see here that the design of the clip has a small tab, and then it has this little hook. Now you want to make sure that when you're holding this, you put it in the correct orientation. You want to make sure that the small hook is facing the outside of the rotor. So we'll just go ahead, clip this guy in, and press it down. Now sometimes these clips get a little bit damaged in the process of transit, and it makes them a little bit harder to install. So as you can see here, this anti-rattle clip has a slightly different shape than this anti-rattle clip. And you can see that in the packaging and the shipping, it got damaged. So we're just gonna pry this up so that it locks into place. Now looking at our old ones, we can kind of tell the shape that they're supposed to have. So I can just take this guy here and gently pry it up. You don't want to go too far. If you go too far, it won't stay seated. So you can see that this is crunched. And now we're uncrunched. So I can go ahead and install them. Now, if you're concerned that the manipulation of this is going to cause too many problems, you can also go ahead and just reuse your old slide pin hardware. So because this is just turning into a little bit more of a pain than I want to deal with, we'll just pop the old guys back in and make sure that we give them a thorough cleaning. So as you can see here, we have the little tab on the inside facing the rotor, and the big tab is outside, not touching the rotor. If you do them reversed, you'll have a very loud squeaking noise because they'll be making contact. So you can see here that this is nice and smooth and each little keeper is on the outside. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my turbo towel and give these guys a really proper cleaning. And then I'll take my caliper grease here. I'm just gonna do a tiny little dab on each one. The less you use, the better in this case, because if you use too much, it'll make its way back onto the rotor face and diminish your braking performance. So now we're ready to go ahead and reinstall our caliper bracket. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my rotor because it's time for reinstallation. I'm gonna go ahead, use my screwdriver to open it up. I'm gonna go ahead and open my rotor, and you'll see here that your rotor has some machining oil on it. So you'll see this like little shine. What you wanna do is you wanna use brake parts cleaner, and in this case, we don't wanna ruin the customer's parking lot. So we're gonna go ahead and put this turbo towel to work. And we're just gonna use our turbo towel here to wipe our hands to make sure we don't have any contaminants on our hands. And then we're gonna wipe off the machining oil from the surface of the rotor. On the inside as well, do the same thing, flip it back around. Keep her nice and pretty. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and use the rest of the turbo towel to clean my hands, because it's important from here on out that we don't contaminate the rotor, because that is going to create a decreased brake performance as well as a noise. And noises create comebacks, and we don't want that. So go ahead and slide this guy back on. And what I like to do is just take one lug nut and put it on the opposite side of where I'm working and just tighten it up by hand, because this is going to align my rotor for me on my face and make my life a lot easier moving forward. At this point, it's a good idea to take your 242 or 243 and go ahead and just lube up the threads. Actually, not lubing, you're just applying Loctite to the threads. It's going to help keep everything nice and tight and torqued for our vehicle. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the top one and work my way to the bottom one. And I'll just get the thread started and get the thread started here. And I always get my thread started by hand. I'm a big fan of starting the threads by hand. Now I'm going to run this in with my impact gun because it makes me a little bit easier to play. A little dab will do ya. Makes my life a little easier there. Now it's time to go ahead and torque these caliper bracket bolts. into position, and they are actually set with 184 foot-pounds. So you want to make sure that you have a torque wrench that is going up to at least 184 foot-pounds. Alrighty, so now we're torqued up there. All right, now we are ready to install our pads. So you can just go ahead, and what I do is I put them in kind of sideways like this. I want to make sure that you install them evenly. It makes life a lot easier. And then once you get it in, you can actually just twist it into position. So we'll do the same thing for the inside. So I'm just going to go ahead, get both sides in and even, and then just twist it sideways. That's what I have found has been the best for me. And we're ready to go ahead and reinstall our caliper. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some additional Loctite on this. Now these are our 13mm bolts. And they hold on our caliper to our caliper mounting bracket. I'll just go ahead and grab this puppy. Now remember earlier we used the screwdrivers to break this sucker down. And we can go ahead and slide it right over our pads with ease and compress our slide pins in. And take our 13mm caliper slide pins and put it into position. Now these caliper slide pins actually have a quick little orientation. This allows you to snug them up much more easily. So you'll see here, there's a relief cut, a U, and a relief cut. That relief cut, you want it to be flat with the face of the caliper. If you don't do that, it just makes it very hard to install. So I'll show you here what I mean by that. The flat cut there and that little half moon that's taken out, what you want to do is just make sure that it's flat with the caliper, because you can see that there's a recess for the caliper. And if you have it sideways, it makes it a little bit more challenging to install. And you can also hold on to this while you're tightening it up. And the same, especially on the bottom, it's a little bit of a tighter clearance there on the bottom. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and snug these up. These get torqued to 30 foot-pounds. So at this point, you'll take your 13mm and you're going to set it to 30 foot-pounds. At this point, we'll go ahead and get our bungee cord out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and gently press the brakes to help the pistons to decompress. So you're going to watch the pistons decompress. I'm just going to go and slowly press the brake pedal. You don't want to go full down brake pedal. And once the brakes are nice and tight, you know that you are done with this. We'll go ahead and remove our lug nut here and reinstall our wheel. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our wheel. Our brakes are on. They're nice and snug. Everything's clean. Everything's torqued. It's time to reinstall the wheel. I'm going to go ahead and lower it and do my final torque. Remove my jack stand. And slowly lift the car down. Now I'll grab my torque wrench and my socket and set the torque wrench to 150 foot-pounds. That is what the wheel lugs like to be at. And then I just go back and check the first one. And we're good. So now that your brakes are pumped, it's time to take it for a short test drive. But at the end of the day, you're all set and ready to rock and roll. To complete today's repairs, we used a 1/2-inch torque wrench, a 21mm socket for the alloy wheel, a 21mm impact socket, a 1/2-inch adjustable breaker bar, our 1/2-inch electric Milwaukee impact gun, a green bungee cord. We have 2 separate hammers, a little baby one and a dead blow. We have 2 different types of wire brushes, but you can just pick whichever one you have. We actually use 2 screwdrivers, and we have our electric Milwaukee 3/8 ratchet. For the consumables, we have blue Loctite 243. You can also use blue Loctite 242. We also have our synthetic brake caliper grease and Tubbo Towels heavy-duty cleaning wipes right off the rotors. We have 2 different rags to help us keep clean. And for the rotors, we use our CarQuest Platinum with our CarQuest Platinum pads. We also have our jack and our jack stand. And lastly, our wheel chocks here.